Welcome to the Heal Deal Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Leona Allen, and I'm here to help you achieve more freedom in your health and your life. I'm the founder of Freedom Health Systems, and I've been a licensed chiropractor and wellness coach for over 2 decades. I've helped men, women, and children transform their lives by removing the physical, chemical, and emotional barriers to natural healing. Every week, I'll be taking you on a journey where you will discover the real truth behind what it takes to heal your mind, body, and soul. Allow me to be your guide as you travel this road to renewed health and a new life. It's time to make a deal with yourself to heal yourself. Please keep in mind that this podcast is for educational purposes only and not to be used as a replacement for medical diagnosis or treatment. With that said, let's begin. All right. Welcome to the Heal Deal Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Leona Allen, and I have another amazing episode created just for you today. And I'm going to discuss what I love to talk about the most, and that is how to achieve more freedom in your health and your life. Now, I know some of you have felt like you're doing everything right, and you're constantly searching for the next meal plan, the next diet, the next fad, or whatever. You want to know if it's keto, if you need to do intermittent fasting, and so many different things. But the problem is there is no simple answer. It's not only that you have to know what to do, you also have to know what not to do. And then you have to understand the why behind what you should do and what not to do. Because for me in my journey, I got caught up in what was popular and what everybody else was doing. But when I started reading and researching and understanding how these things affect my body, how my thoughts, my actions, what I put in my body, what I need to get out my body, those are the things that kept me motivated. And those are the things that help me determine what I will and will not do. And I know a lot of you don't study this. I know a lot of you depend on experts and other content creators like myself to answer your questions. But really, my intention is to not share what I've experienced personally and clinically, but actually encourage you to do some research on some of these topics that I had, because there's no one size fits all. There's no one thing that's going to work for everybody. There's some core things that will, like fresh air, clean water, movement, and things like that. But when it comes to food and all these different things, a lot of us get involved with it personally. Some of us are real attached to some of our habits, and some of us are ruled by a lot of our beliefs and what we believe in, whether it's hurting you or not. So what we need to do is really start to listen to certain topics like this with open minds. I try very hard to go by facts. I try very hard to go by clinical experience, and I go by personal experience. But I know what works for me may not work for everybody else. But at least sharing, if things resonate with you or make sense to you, that's kind of how you create your program. All right. That's how you create your systems. You take in what you can and spit out the rest. And that's really what we need to learn to do. Okay. So sometimes we just can't rely on just one thing or one person. You may have to understand different approaches, but if you don't know how to do that, that's where the confusion comes in. But really understand, as you follow me or someone else, really try to focus on one thing at a time. Because I know a lot of you binge watch videos and read all the books. But as a content creator, as a coach, I really believe in the importance of simplifying things and put them in ways that we can digest it. And if we can't do it all, that's okay. But if you just can pick 1 or 2 things at a time and do it consistently, then you can start adding other things. So the things that I'm going to share with you in this episode, some things will make sense to you, and you might find some things are going to be hard to let go of for several different reasons. And you're going to understand why as I discuss this. So I just wanted to set the tone before I get into this and a couple more announcements. Again, welcome to the podcast. I took a couple months off. I got a lot of projects going on. And I just had to take a break from the podcast and had to focus on other things. For example, I had just released my third book called Shop and Savor. And what that was, it was created based on a food shopping guide that I give away and still give away for free. And I'll be sure to put the link in the show notes or the description, depending on what platform you're listening to, and have a link to that so you can get access to that. And then what I did was I took that shopping list, and myself and Chef Terrell, who is a professional chef, created recipes from those actual ingredients, okay, or actual list of foods. Because a lot of times when you're on this journey and you're trying to eat better and you're trying to buy cleaner ingredients, the thing is, what do I do with it? Because we're so used to foods that are processed, already packaged and easy to make. But I am a strong supporter of eating whole foods and preparing our foods at home, because that's where we have the most control. Because when you're eating at restaurants and things like that, you don't really know who's behind all of that, who's in the kitchen and what their energy and what their beliefs are. So it makes a huge difference to really bring back eating at home and preparing our own foods with our own energy and our own love and our own care. I just love cooking. I didn't always love it, but as I start to understand the importance of food, it's not just about what you put in your mouth and how it tastes. The preparation's important. All that's important. The connections I have with my children, because they help me prepare meals, and we connect in a way that's different when we do anything else. So food is beyond what we eat. It's spiritual. It's energetic, it's love. And I just believe that when it ties in all together, that's where the health comes from. And the reason why I say that is you can cook in a rushed manner. You could be angry, you could be stressed, but it does affect how you digest. You can have the perfect food, but if you don't put love and care into it, it can still upset your digestive system. But I really want to get back to the basics. We need to get back to our relationship with food. We got to understand the purpose of food, and we have to understand what food is. So when you're making these decisions, what are you making your decisions from? Because a lot of my decisions came from actual feedback from lab tests and experience in the last 20 years. All right. So we got to get honest with that. So getting to today's topic, it's all in line with what I love to talk about the most, and that is achieving more freedom in your health and your life. But it comes from so many approaches. I don't have myself in this one bubble where I'm the gut doctor or the thyroid doctor or anything like that. I really like to focus on all things that affect our health. Because as we start to take care of ourselves and feed our bodies what we need physically and emotionally, it does expand into other areas of our life. Because as I evolved into this space, it has blessed me in so many other ways. And I can't even explain how just this space has really helped me emotionally and physically. And it's just so important. So I just wanted to start this new season of episodes off with letting you know where I come from and what my purpose and what my mission is. And like I said, you may not agree with everything. That's okay. But I'm coming from a space where it comes from my viewpoint and what I've seen help the majority of the people that I have worked with. Okay. And a little bit more about that. I love working with women over 40. Everybody deserves to be healthy. But the reason why I love working with women over 40 is because we've abused our bodies for so long and we've been through so much. And then we get to this point in our lives, our children have grown up, we're about to retire or whatever. We're just in a different place in our lives. And we finally looked in the mirror and we're like, what happened? When you start to lose your family, you start to lose your parents, or you start to become a caregiver, you start to look at your life differently than someone who has their whole life ahead of them. And as we get older, we need to be in a position to teach the younger generations. But what's happening is that a lot of women my age don't even realize the impact that our habits and our life and our health has. And if we don't know, or if you don't know, how can you share that with your children and your grandchildren? Because what happens is sick children become even sicker adults. The difference is children don't really sense it right away. And that's why metabolic syndrome is so dangerous, is because you don't see it. It's very insidious and you don't really see it or feel it right away until it's too late. They even talk about the first symptom of heart disease is a heart attack. There's people walking around with cancers and diabetes and other illnesses and don't even know it. And that's what happened to me. You know, I was dealing with these illnesses for years, but it wasn't until I looked under the hood, so to speak, and got my blood work done that I was able to see what was happening in my body. So really get clear on when you're listening to other content creators and trying to make a decision and you're following this person and that person. How well do you know yourself? Because until you know where you're at, until you know the condition that you're in, it's going to be very hard to figure out what works for you. Some of you are just throwing darts, hoping it'll stick. But it doesn't work that way. You got to take the time to learn about you. You got to take the time to understand your habits, your thoughts, your beliefs that have been detrimental to you. Then if you listen to somebody, it's like intuitively you'll know that that's right. So what we got to do is we got to learn to discern. We got to learn to listen for a purpose, to understand and not attack. And that's another thing I see on social media. There's this attack on everything. You know, it's like people listen to you just to argue with you or just to say, you know what, you're wrong or I don't agree. If you don't agree, fine. But don't be so negative. Don't attack the person. They're called trolls, I guess. I mean, they're going to be out there. They're not going anywhere. But I'm just telling you what, as content creators, we go through, because a lot of us mean well. I know there's some out there that don't, but that's not my purpose of this episode today. But my purpose is, as a content creator, the ones that are more sincere, we really want to help others for those who will listen. And yeah, we got to kind of quiet the trolls because they're out there. But if one person hears our message and makes a change, that's what matters. It's not about getting 1 million views, even though it's great. You know, that means more people are listening, right? But at the end of the day, if we're not transforming lives and not helping make a difference, it doesn't matter. And the reason why I do what I do is because I know I'm helping people. And I know that because they tell me. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage for that. This is how I'm going to feel in this episode and future episodes. And go ahead and subscribe or like or follow, depending on the platform you're listening to, and support this channel. Okay. So let me go ahead and officially begin with today's topic. And a lot of questions that I get when I'm doing a master class or a workshop, I'm talking about metabolism, I'm talking about health over 40, I'm talking about hormones. But at the end of the day, the most common question I get is, what do I eat? What brands do I buy? What meal plans do I get? You know, everybody wants something that's already packaged and ready to go. But unfortunately, I wish it was that easy, because I want to go in the chat or talk about in my workshops, hey, use this meal plan and it's going to be everything you need. But the problem is it's not. I mean, I'm familiar with some of the meal plans, but some of them had a lot of the foods that I'm going to share with you today. It's like, well, they were good up until they say they added this. Like, let me give you an example. Like Whole Foods, for example. I was a huge fan of Whole Foods, shopped there a lot. And the closest Whole Foods to me is about 45 minutes away. And I used to drive all the way up there to do grocery shopping. And then I learned that a lot of their foods contain ingredients that I'm going to share with you today. So it's like once you know better, you just do better. But I did a lot of things for a long time because I didn't know better. Yes, there's some good products there that you should be aware of, but just because it's in a store called Whole Foods doesn't mean that everything in there is healthy. This is why we got to educate ourselves. Yes, it's a start. That's where I started. That's where I got my chocolate chip cookies and all those things, right? Because it's like, I'm just telling you, I wasn't always this way. I wasn't born like this. I've been there. Their cookies are amazing. But I had to break free from that, all right? Because it doesn't matter if the cookies from Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Publix, or whatever. We got to learn to eat to live. We got to learn to understand our food. And it doesn't matter what brand, how it's packaged, or where you bought it from. So now it gets to the point where I love to just make my own cookies where I have control over the ingredients, what I put in it. I can control the sugar levels, okay? Because another thing I want you to know is you don't have to be perfect. You don't. Do your best because it's very difficult to be perfect today. Very difficult. But we need to understand what food is and how to make the best choices with what we have. So that's why I came up with this topic about the 5 most dangerous foods that may be sabotaging your metabolism. Because even if you are looking for a meal plan or just trying to change your diet or anything like that, a lot of these plans contains the food that I'm going to discuss with you today. So that's why a lot of you are just on this hamster wheel when it comes to health. So when you decide to shop for your food, or if you do decide to choose a meal plan, you got to make sure that it at least doesn't have these 5 foods. Now, like I said before, this is not to overwhelm you. You have to start somewhere. So when you go through these 5 foods and you find that you eat 4 of them, you don't have to try to get rid of them overnight because that's very discouraging for most of you. And that's why a lot of you fail. So I know what you guys go through and why you keep giving up. Start with 1. Start looking in your cabinets and finding a lot of these foods that you already have and start to eliminate them one at a time. For example, not to get off topic, when I started using more natural products to clean my home with, I eventually got rid of the Clorox and replaced it with non-toxic solutions. But I didn't do that right away. I just picked one at a time. I started with the things that I cleaned my home with, and then I evolved from there. So we can't expect to fix all this overnight. I mean, it hurts if you go in your house and get rid of everything, you'll realize that you have no food, right? And some of these things I'm going to share, you're going to be like, no, do I really have to get rid of it? Yes, because you can't pick and choose what you want. I mean, you can when it's in the journey. But at the end of the day, the one thing you're holding on to is that one thing that you eventually have to get rid of. It may be last on your list. You're going to change all the other things, but you may hold on to this particular food. But when it gets to that point, you may have to get rid of that too. All right. So at the end of the day, you got to understand what food is, what health is, and that's going to help you make better decisions in the long run. But first, let's do a recap on metabolic disease. So if you followed me for a while, I talk a lot about metabolic diseases, the function of the body, healthy weight loss, and things like that. So when I'm talking about these foods, these are foods that actually interfere with your body's metabolic process. Okay? These are foods that feed these chronic conditions. And some of these foods, you may have been told they're okay and they're harmless. And some of these foods may be your favorite foods, but you got to choose. What do you want more? Do you want health or do you want the food? So let me just briefly go over what metabolic syndrome is. It is a condition that creeps up on you silently. And the problem is it has no obvious symptoms until it's too late. And the problem is once you start to have these symptoms like fatigue, headaches, hair thinning, unable to sleep, hot flashes, you think it's a part of aging, but really it's your metabolism breaking down And poor metabolism is usually the core of your problem, your root issues. But we're in a society where we treat the symptoms, but we're not getting to the underlying cause. So according to the medical definition, metabolic syndrome isn't just one disease. It's a cluster of conditions like high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and obesity. And there's like 5 of them. And they say if you have 3 out of 5, then you have metabolic syndrome. But in my opinion, just having one is detrimental to your health. Okay, so that's like saying, okay, I only have high blood pressure. I'm not overweight and I don't have high blood sugar, so I must be okay. No, we need to resolve these issues because if you don't, they'll accumulate over time if you don't do anything about it. Because by the time you get diagnosed, you probably had the disease for at least 10 years. So metabolic syndrome is a lot deeper than a list of symptoms that you have. And when you start to get one or the other, when you start to accumulate into 3 up to 5 or more of these, it puts you at risk for a lot more serious issues. So yeah, it may have started as high blood sugar. It may have started as high blood pressure or being overweight. But over time, when it's unresolved, it turns into things such as heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and even cancer. And the insidious nature of metabolic syndrome means that it does happen gradually. Like I said before, you can have these illnesses for at least 10 years before you even know about it because it's silent. It becomes undetected for years. And if you do have some symptoms, you've been told it was normal, just pop a pill and keep it moving. But over time, these insidious diseases or symptoms can manifest into more severe health problems. And then by the time you start to experience these health problems, it may be too late. So today I'm going to talk about 5 foods that are destroying your metabolism. And I'm going to break down into why they're detrimental. Like I said before, we're so attached to how food looks and how it tastes. It doesn't matter if it's real or fake. We get caught up in that. But if you understand the purpose of food, why we should eat it or why we shouldn't, that's the real motivator. You don't need another brand, another list. What you need is understanding because you can easily find a brand and try it. But the reason why people ask me this question is because they haven't found a brand or a food or a meal plan that works for them. And to be honest, you don't really need a plan. You need to understand what you should eat and what you shouldn't. That's where the confusion is, and that's where the work comes in. And we're getting to the point where we don't want to do the work. We just want everything to land on our lap so we can blame all the technology and all the comforts that we have for all that. We want everything to be comfortable, including our healing. But unfortunately, that's one thing we can't make artificial intelligence do, okay? We can't do it. But unfortunately, when it comes to our health, our bodies, we still got to put in the work, okay? So I'm going to break down how these foods are detrimental to your health, and then I'll provide some healthy solutions and resources that'll help you get you from where you are to where you want to be. So by the end of this episode, you should be more equipped with the knowledge to make better choices that will not only help you get healthy, but also your family. All right, that's so important. So go ahead and grab your pen and paper and get ready to take some notes. And let's go ahead and have a conversation about the 5 foods that may be sabotaging your metabolism. Now, you might hate me or love me for this, but we're going to start anyway. So the first food, and we all know this, is sugar. We got to understand that sugar is one of the biggest things that is destroying your health, destroying your metabolism, because they put it in everything because it's highly addictive. That's why it's in all our foods, because the purpose of food manufacturers is to get you hooked so you become a customer for life. We want to trust what's on our shelves, right? And you would think, why would they put stuff in our food that harm us? Because they make money from it. They want a high shelf life. They need to preserve the foods. They need to make them taste good so that you will come back. And this starts at a young age. I mean, some of us eat foods that we've been eating since childhood. We have childhood nostalgia when it comes to our sugary foods. We're still in our 30s and 40s and we still want birthday cake, right? And balloons and all that stuff. And you think about it, like, come on. I mean, I'm kind of different because I don't do that anymore. But we have these childlike ways that we haven't been able to let go of. Ouch, ouch. I know I made someone mad there, but we got to learn to let go of these things and start to create new traditions and new healthy habits, because at the end of the day, you got to choose what's more important. Turning up and saying, yeah, I'm going to use my birthday to eat and drink what I want, or use this time to really support my body. And that's what we got to do. It's not cool, but that's the truth of it. It's like we want to get healthy. We want to lose weight. But if I say no more birthday cake, no more birthday parties, it's like, I don't want to do it. And you shut down. But hear me out here. I'm not saying you have to be perfect, but you got to be real. If you want the cake, choose to have the cake, but you got to understand what it's doing to your body, because your body's not thinking, oh, it's her birthday, I'm not going to harm her body. She can eat and drink what she wants, but I'm not going to allow it to harm her. It's not working that way. It's going to harm you whether it's your birthday or not. And it also depends on how much you do it. All right. If it's once a year, it's going to affect your body differently than if you're eating sugar every day. You know, you got sugar in your coffee, you got sugar in your tea, you got sugar on your pizza, whatever. All right. So it has a negative impact on our metabolism. And I'm not just talking about refined sugar, but I'm also talking about the high fructose corn syrup, all those things that make our food sweet, because what they do is spike the glucose levels, which increase the insulin levels, which causes a lot of other problems in our bodies. You know, so these high intakes of sugar, particularly refined sugar and high fructose corn syrup, it's a major contributor to insulin resistance, prediabetes and diabetes, and also a key component of metabolic diseases. And it feeds a lot of illnesses. It feeds your infections. It feeds UTIs. It feeds all those things. So these spikes in sugar levels are extremely dangerous, and they make it seem like it's not. And for the diabetics out there, they just tell you to take your drug, take your insulin, and you'll be okay. But there's not enough emphasis on the healing diet. They pretty much tell you to continue with a lot of these foods that I'm going to share with you today. So insulin goes up when we eat. It's a natural process. But when you're eating sugar and when your insulin levels are chronically high, it's hard to detox. It's hard to burn fat. It's hard to do many other things because it's extremely inflammatory. So we got to understand that. So where I see issues such as diabetes and heart disease and cancers, there is poor glucose metabolism. So we got to start reducing our sugar intake. I mean, this is a priority. This is number one on the list. So, practical advice, you got to eliminate these sugars, especially refined sugars. Start with that. Don't get caught up in, what kind of sugars do I use? Because you're still trying to replace that sugar. Because at the end of the day, sugar is sugar. If your insulin's already high, they are going to impact your body. When I was pre-diabetic, I had to get rid of all the sugars, heal, and now I introduce more healthier sugars. But if you're struggling with weight and blood pressure, you really got to stop it all. And I'll put my food shopping guide in the resource, and it will share some lower glycemic foods to help you get on the right track to start reducing the sugar intake. So key points on sugar overload can lead to insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is the major foundation or the major cause in a lot of these metabolic diseases we see today. So they'll say it's high blood pressure and heart disease and obesity that's causing metabolic syndrome, but it's really the insulin resistance that's causing the metabolic syndrome. And then we got to get to what's causing the insulin resistance. So we got to go deep. You got to go deep before you go wide and wondering, what diet and what exercise. you got to get down to your body and how it's functioning first, because the next meal plan isn't enough for this type of problem. And we got to also understand the excessive consumption. How much are you eating? So again, before you start dabbling into these meal plans and this different sugar and monk fruit and all that stuff, you got to know where you are. How bad is your sugar? How excessive is your sugar? Start with that and start to work with what you are already eating and start to reduce those, okay? Stop looking for the next thing that'll fix your sugar cravings, because that's the problem. You're trying to fix a sugar craving with another sugar craving. Then it's not just the sugar, it's about, okay, why am I craving sugar? Because of the sugar metabolism. So we got to dig deep and start to heal that metabolism. So we got to start to get healthy. And then over time, you'll be able to manage your cravings and you're not stressing out over the new thing because you want something sweet. Because trust me, I loved my sugar. Like I said, I loved my chocolate chip cookies. Chocolate was my thing. But now that I get healthy, I rarely eat chocolate chip cookies. I mean, I eat them, but it's not every week or every other day like it used to be. And these were the organic, gluten-free chocolate chip cookies that I used to eat. And that's when I was pre-diabetic. So that's what I'm saying. You can do these natural, healthy alternatives. But at the end of the day, I was still diabetic, even with those choices. And of course, the health food companies aren't going to tell you that because they want your business. Sorry, not good news. News like this isn't popular. News like this doesn't get shared enough. But I'm not here to tickle your ears. I want to help you get well. And we got to take this stuff seriously and stop wasting our time looking for an alternative that's just going to lead to the same problem. So let's get to number 2, which is kind of related to the first one. That's artificial sweeteners, because that's what a lot of people do. They know that sugar's bad for them. So they'll go to the diet Cokes, the diet yogurts, the diet, I can't even think of the things. Anything that's low calorie and diet and sugar free, you start to go to those foods thinking you're doing better. Now your heart's in the right place. You're trying, right? But chances are you were told, hey, drink Diet Coke. It's going to help you. But the thing is, artificial sweeteners also cause inflammation and have a negative impact on your metabolism and how your body functions. Because artificial sweeteners, even though it may seem like you're not eating as much sugar or no sugar, when you see low sugar or sugar free, they're putting artificial sweeteners in it. And you're just falsely thinking that you're doing better. And I would tell people sometimes these artificial sweeteners are actually worse than the actual sugar, because it's a lot of chemicals that mimics and tricks the body into thinking that it's eating something sweet. So now it's playing mind games, all right? Now it's affecting your mind and it's affecting other areas of your body as well. So this is how artificial sweeteners disrupt your metabolic process and actually leads to more increased cravings for sweet foods. They could also, because it's not a real food, can start to damage the gut and the actual microbiome of the gut. Because the reason why a lot of these foods are calorie free is because it's bypassing a lot of the natural processes. Somehow it bypasses the digestive process. So you don't want to do that. Stop trying to trick the body. The purpose of food is to eat. And if you do anything to bypass its natural metabolic functions, it's only going to destroy it. And all this is in the name of convenience, profits, taste, look, color, texture, and shelf life. But it is costing your body and it is costing your health. And we got to understand that. So again, do your inventory, because a lot of these meal plans that are out there that say they're healthier for you, they'll contain, some of them still contain sugars, especially if they brag about being low fat. Usually those foods are going to be high sugar or high carbs and all these things. So you got to be careful. You're going to eat a lot of things that are high in sugar. So for me, and I'm just saying, I'm just going to say it, I know people that are plant-based, and it is possible to be healthy and plant-based. It is possible. Okay. But a lot of people that are saying that they're plant-based or vegan, they're very unhealthy. They're eating a lot of fake foods. They're eating a lot of French fries and pizzas. So just because you're not eating animal products doesn't mean you're healthy. So that's why I don't like labels. Eat food and make sure it's healthy for you. And if the food is plant-based, great. And real plants, something you can grow and touch and actually eat it and it provides fuel for the body, I'm fine with that. But if it's a lot of these processed meats and things that are out there, these fake meats, that's what I like to call them, that's where it gets dangerous. And if you are a meat eater, which I am, I'm more of a chicken and fish girl. But if you are a meat eater and do eat lamb and beef and things like that, choose better quality, grass-fed, free range. I don't eat a lot of meat anymore, but if I do, I'll just get it from a local farmer or something like that. But you won't see me eating the grocery store brands. Very rare. I'll try to get most of my things at a farmer's market. So this takes a lot of research and studying, but what I'm trying to do is whet your appetite and start to get you to look in your own kitchen, your own lives, because a lot of us are looking outwards, trying to find someone that has it all laid out for you, and you have to do nothing. You got to do some research. You got to find out what your deficiencies are. That's why when I work with people, I don't just say, here's your diet, here's your supplement. I see what's going on in their bodies first, what their protein levels are, what their vitamin D levels are, how their digestive system is processing. You got to know these things. Then I match the diet that gives them what they need. They need to reduce their inflammation. They may be lacking certain enzymes. That's where the health comes from. It's not the next diet or fad. So again, back to like recommendations. There's no artificial sweetener that I recommend. Again, if you need something sweet and you're in the beginning of the journey, and I do have a list in my food shopping guide, the more natural, the better. But for me, if I have something where I want something sweet, I'm not really doing sugars. I'll do some berries. I'll do a peach. I'll do an apple. I'll do some fruit. But I'm not trying to look for something sweet like a candy bar. So again, we got to roll back. If you want something sweet, have it sweet. But stick with something that is healthy for you. A handful of raisins, okay? Whatever it is. But you got to start somewhere. You got to get back to the basics. Some other sweeteners, stevia. I'm okay with stevia. We got to be careful because now they're highly processing that too. Raw honey is actually pretty good. Again, I know the vegans are like, no, honey is bee vomit. We can go on and on about that. But why are we arguing about honey when that's really not the biggest problem? All right. People have been eating honey for years, but it wasn't until we got all this ultra processed foods that we got the issue. Because I know there's people out there that are avoiding honey, but they're eating a lot of fake meat. Okay, so we got to find that balance. So again, I'm not here to just say this diet is better than that. We just got to get to the basics and not get so obsessed over whether you should have honey or not, or whether you should eat chicken or not. There's things that we just learn as we go and just start to know what works for our body and what doesn't. Okay, because that gets frustrated. You don't want to do anything. But if you do decide to eat it, just make sure you got the cleanest form of it. But I'm finding with a lot of these foods, it's not really the food that's bad. It's how it's processed that's bad. Okay, so let's go on and move to number 3. And the third food that is destroying your metabolism is refined oils. And now this is a tricky one. It's a little controversial because we're told to avoid oils and fats and all that stuff. But we got to understand things from a physiological standpoint. When I'm sharing this information with you, it's coming from clinical and personal experience. And we have to understand why our bodies need what we need. So our bodies do need fats. That's why a lot of us stay away from oils and things like that. But remember, it's not always the food that's bad. It's how it's processed and the things that they add to the foods. So we do need fats. Our cell membrane needs it. Our nerves need it. Our brains need it. So when you don't have the full picture, it's kind of hard to really tell what's right and what isn't. So when I hear information about what's good, what's not, I really try hard to understand and help educate how all these things impact the body, good or bad. So we stay away from things, but we don't know the whole story. And oils is one of those things that confuse us. Margarine is supposed to replace butter, because butter is high in saturated fat, and saturated fat causes heart disease and all that. But actually, with my research, I'm seeing more problems with things like margarine. I can't believe it's not butter, and all these other oil type substitutes. So you got to be careful. And that's why refined oils is an issue, especially when they're on the shelf and they're labeled as vegetable oils and peanut oils and avocado oils. They sound pretty good, right? But they're all refined. I personally use coconut oil, but there is some processing involved. If it's in a jar and you're not getting the coconut yourself and doing the work, when you get in the store, there has been some processes done to it for shelf life, for color, for stability, because a lot of the oils do kind of separate. If you ever made your own salad dressing or something, when it sits for a long time, it'll separate. So a lot of processes are done so things stay uniform and they look good on the shelf, so you'll buy it. But if you see this oil and it's kind of clear on the top and thicker on the bottom, you're going to think this isn't healthy, this isn't attractive. So you want the one that looks more uniform. So we got to think about these things. Why are they doing what they are doing? It's for long shelf life. And refined oils is one of those things that you really have to pay attention to because they're in everything. All right. Even when you start to eat things like organic chips and all this stuff, all of these include refined oils, because the thing is with refined oils, they're trying to make something that stays solid at room temperature. So when you buy the package, you don't have all this oil in the package. Have you noticed when you buy cookies and chips and crackers and things like that, you'll see oil in the ingredients, but the packages aren't greasy. But if you do cook at home and use butter or coconut oil or something like that, it'll be soggy over time. So we got to think about why are they refining it? And in that process is what makes it dangerous. So the impact of these refined oils and examples of those include canola oil. Canola oil is a genetically modified oil. Soybean oil, like I said, not only is that highly processed, but soy has a bad rep through the years. And they're also both high in omega-6 fatty acids. So a lot of us have an imbalance in our omega fatty acids, but when your omega-6 fatty acids are high, that can promote inflammation and metabolic dysfunction. So there's a lot of studies that show the negative impact of high omega-6 fatty acids on health. And I could probably do a separate episode on that alone. But you have to understand that these highly processed oils, the vegetable oils, the canola oils, the soybean oils, they're highly refined. And these are the oils that's found in the majority of our processed foods. Yes, you may find some olive oil chips, some avocado chips, some things cooked with palm oil and coconut oil. They may be better alternatives, but they're still cooking these foods at high temperatures. They're still being processed. They're still being refined. So the more cooking, the more processing nutrients are removed from your food. So ideally, I do choose butter. Just make sure you don't cook it at high temperatures. Ghee is also a good alternative. I occasionally use palm oil for cooking. It has a strong taste to me, so I don't use it very often. And I also use coconut oil the most, because you got to think about it. Even if you use olive oil, which I do use that as well, but I use that more for my lettuce salads if I choose to use it, but I don't cook it, because sometimes you can buy these good products, but once you cook it at high temperatures, it is not very healthy. That's why I do not recommend frying. Yes, I may do some baking in oil or some low temperature cooking, like medium low, but I do not recommend high temperature frying because the oil becomes very inflammatory when it's cooked at high temperatures. So again, we got to think about how we're preparing the food, the process of the food, and the foods that we're eating. How have they been processed? And that's what we really got to think about. So if you are going to use oils, I do recommend the more healthier fats, the extra virgin oils such as extra virgin olive oil and coconut oil, and the less refined, the better. So just a few key points from the refined oils and how they destroy your metabolism is because they're very high in omega-6, which can promote inflammation and metabolic issues. And the more refined, the more dangerous, okay? And again, some healthier options include olive and coconut oil, even butter, but you got to pay attention to how you're using the oils, whether it's for high temperature cooking. Again, you can have all these vegetables and things like that, but if you're overcooking them, what's the use? Or if you're cooking with high temperature, what's the use? So we got to keep that in mind as we're cooking and meal prepping. So there's different degrees of processing and refining, but I'm just saying the more refined the food, the less nutritional value that it has. So hope that makes sense. Again, this is an overview. And again, based on your feedback and your questions, if I need to elaborate and go deeper into this stuff, I'd be happy to. But we need to start looking at this stuff because what I want to say over and over again is that sometimes it's not the food that's bad, it's what's been done to it. All right. The oil naturally found in olives is fine. But once they process it and process it again, then add it to foods and cook it again and process it even more. And then they put it in a bag and add all these other preservatives so they don't expire for a couple years. That's an issue because when you start to cook at home, unless you're freezing it or something like that, it won't last as long. This is what I think. Usually when I eat foods, it's like, is this something I can actually make at home? Because a lot of foods I do purchase because I don't know how to make it or there's a lot of time involved because I love eating foods from other countries. I love Indian food. I love food from Nigeria and it's a lot of work or I don't know how to do it. So I may buy those types of things and, kits that they have for certain Jamaican foods that I may need help with if I don't know how to make it myself. So again, you just got to pick and choose. Like I said, it's good to make it from scratch. But sometimes due to time, I myself may have to buy some jerk chicken sauce or something like that to add into my recipe. But that sauce may have some processed oils in it. But that's more the exception, not the rule. Okay, because it's hard to be perfect. We have to buy oils. None of us have an oil extractor in our homes, I guess. So we have to really keep that in mind. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to the fourth food that may destroy your metabolism. So let's talk about processed dairy. Now, I know I'm talking to many groups of people, and then there's going to be people that says you shouldn't have dairy at all. I get that. But we got to understand that we're on different stages of our lives. Sometimes it's not about the food that's bad. It's about the quality of food that's bad. So I'm not here to say whether you should have dairy or not at all, but just understand that what we really shouldn't be having is the highly processed dairy. All right. I have a story about dairy. I thought I was lactose intolerant for many, many years. And then when I went to Peru, it was before my kids were born. So I'll say maybe at least 20 years ago, I had raw dairy for the first time. And I didn't know it was raw at the time. It was so long ago. I didn't really say, ooh, raw dairy, let me try it. But, I was just in a place I wanted to try something new. And so I ended up just trying cheese. It was actually raw cheese. And when I went to Peru over 20 years ago, I was actually a vegetarian. So I wasn't doing any dairy products at that time because I thought I was lactose intolerant, right? Lactose intolerant, shouldn't have dairy, avoid dairy. And I was doing that for quite some time, even though I was doing a lot of vegetarian options or non-dairy options. Now, fast forward, knowing what I know, a lot of these foods were highly processed. Soy milk, Oh goodness, I can't even think of the things, but I know I did a lot of soy milk replacing dairy. Like I said earlier, sometimes when we're trying to make decisions, either to go plant-based or dairy-free, we end up eating foods that don't have those things in it, but may be just as dangerous because they have the chemicals or have been processed in a way that it'll be harmful to your health when ingested. So I was that person and still ended up diabetic with fatty liver years later because of those decisions that I made. So yes, I personally have gotten back to eating dairy. I don't eat a lot of it, but when I do, I avoid the highly processed dairy, all the pasteurized and ultra pasteurized and all that, because the purpose of that is really, just think of it this way. A lot of the commercial cows that are produced, they're raised in quarters that are very toxic and unhealthy. They're piled up on top of each other. They're not getting enough fresh air. They're not clean. They're loaded with diseases. So they pasteurize it to pretty much kill off the bacteria. So you're still eating or drinking the dairy, but what they did was kill off all the bacteria. And not only that, a lot of these cows are injected with antibiotics and other things. So you're pretty much getting your product from very sick cows. So that's probably why a lot of people avoid dairy, because of how it's processed. So back to my experience in Peru, when I was eating raw cheese, I was fine. I even had ice cream from the raw milk, and I didn't have any of the GI distress. I didn't have the bloating. I didn't have the cramping. I didn't have any problems whatsoever. And I actually enjoyed the cheese. I would just eat cheese and I enjoyed it. And the ice cream was amazing. And then when I got back to the States, I decided to just seek out sources of raw dairy. And to this day, I do find sources of raw dairy when available. If it's not raw, I leave it alone. But fortunately, I live not too far from a farmer, and he has raw dairy. He has raw cheese. So I do buy it, even though I still don't eat a lot of it. I do it in moderation. I might just have a little bit of cheese on my salad or something like that. Maybe I'll do a little cream in my coffee. I really don't do a lot of dairy. But when I do, I prefer raw or minimally processed dairy, because when I go to these farms and I see the cows, they're outside, they're getting sunlight, they're eating grass, because a lot of these commercial dairy farms, the cows don't eat grass. They're eating a lot of GMO grains. So they're not eating foods from their natural diet. So I had to think, okay, if I'm going to eat dairy from these cows, at least they're clean. They're not carrying a lot of disease. They're not pumped with a bunch of antibiotics. So I do a lot better with that dairy. So really, as we make decisions, it's like, if you're going to be dairy free, that's fine. It's like, I believe there's really no, I guess, nutritional benefit. We say we need it for our bones, but I'm finding that that's not completely true, especially when they're marketing the pasteurized dairy. So it's really, if they're promoting dairy is good for the bones, it's the commercial people that's really promoting that. So that's why I'm like, I don't know, because I have seen people that do the commercial dairy because they believe what they tell them, but they're still dealing with hip fractures and arthritis and osteoporosis and things of that sort. So it's a little bit more too than drinking your milk every day. It's about the quality, and it's like you're getting certain different nutrients from the raw dairy. But I find that if you eliminate it altogether, you won't have as many deficiencies as you would expect. Okay, I haven't seen any correlation between my reduction of dairy and the health of my bones and teeth. I haven't lost any teeth. I'm in my 50s, don't have any cavities. So we're told a lot of things that isn't necessarily true. So this is why I love to talk about metabolic health and making sure our bodies get what they need. So I'm finding that with the diet that I do eat, and I do monitor my labs at least once a year and tweak it based on my health. So if I find I need something or don't need something, I may modify some things. But like I said before, I've been doing this for quite some time. And I find that metabolically, as I look at my blood numbers, as I look at my markers, as I look at my deficiencies, I'm actually healthier now than I was 20 years ago. So I really make my decisions based on my metabolic health, but you will not know that until you actually look and see, because a lot of you have no idea what your deficient is. Some people have no idea how they're metabolizing their food. You can have the perfect diet, whether you're dairy free or not, but are you able to process it? Because your bodies need micronutrients and macronutrients and, things like enzymes, minerals, proteins, magnesium, calcium, things like that to actually activate certain metabolic processes in your body. So you could be eating all these foods, but if you're deficient in calcium or magnesium or zinc, you may be unable to activate the process that your body needs to do at that time. So it's not about, being dairy free and vegan. We have to understand what our needs are in our bodies. And that's what's really lacking in our society, is getting the comprehensive testing done. So if you are interested, I'll have some resources in the description so you can reach out so we can discuss the process of getting some of these labs done. I recommend starting off with a breakthrough call so you can just kind of get an idea of what you're looking for, what you've been through, and what you need, and take it from there. So that is usually the first start, especially if you haven't gone down this road before. And then we'll just take it through a process. I have my general tests that I do with people, but certain times I have to change things around based on your circumstances, your history, and things of that sort. So there's no one size fits all. We got to see where we are. And like you may find metabolically, you can't do any dairy at all, or you can do raw dairy. So we have to know what our bodies are capable of and really get that information so we can focus on balancing the body and using what we can to achieve that. So we're all in different stages. So what we got to do is understand where we are and start to make those changes. But you'll be unable to if you don't have the knowledge, if you don't have the resources, if you don't have the information. So that's why I'm spending time to do this, because we get overwhelmed. You got to make choices over time. So again, like I talked about in oils, a lot of time it's not the food that's bad, it's the processing of the foods that's bad. So by the time they pasteurize it and ultra pasteurize it and add all these other additives and chemicals and remove this and emulsify and do all these things, it's not even recognizable. It's far away from the original product. So you're going to see a theme here. The less processed, the better. So I went from processed dairy to soy products to raw dairy to really barely any dairy at all. Because as I get better and as my needs change, so does my diet, because I'm always testing and monitoring to see where I'm at. So this is another thing we got to realize. My body probably naturally wanted more dairy because at the time I was pregnant. I was going through two pregnancies. So I did do a lot more dairy back then. And that's probably why I didn't have like the bone issues or the cavity issues, because a lot of women end up getting tooth decay during pregnancy because you're losing so much calcium. So at that point in my life, the raw dairy was a good idea for me. But ever since, I guess my needs have changed. My youngest is 13 now, but I'm finding that now in this phase in my life, I don't have any desire for dairy. It may be a treat here and there, but I make sure that with my yearly testing, my body has what it needs as far as vitamin D levels, magnesium, calcium, vitamin K, and things like that. So that's what we got to understand. But when you're in this journey, just know that we have to start reducing the highly processed foods. It really comes down to how much processing it is. To make it look more like something it's not, more processing has been achieved or more processing has happened to that food. So you're going from the block of cheese to these convenient slices that are in these plastic wraps. I don't touch that stuff. I did back in the past, but I don't anymore. And I can't remember the last time I had that type of cheese. And I saw something on Facebook not too long ago, and I'm going to make a note to look into it myself, but they just call it slices. They don't even call it cheese anymore. So a lot of these foods that we see may not even have dairy in it at all, but it's dairy-like. It looks like dairy, it tastes like dairy, but it's not even made of dairy. So we got to be aware of these extra chemicals and fillers and preservatives and other unhealthy fats that are negatively impacting your metabolism. Okay. Again, at a certain point in your life, moderation is key. But if you're going to have dairy, I would opt for the plain, unsweetened dairy products. And I would look for raw where available. But again, you got to know, of course, if you have an intolerance to dairy, allergy to dairy, just leave it alone. This is for educational purposes. I'm just telling you, not one thing fits for everybody. Some people do well with dairy, some people don't. So if you don't do it. If you don't do well with dairy, don't force it, because now they have medications where you eat the dairy and then take a medication so you don't feel the damage being done. So we got to have some sense when we're doing this, and just know that if your body doesn't do well, don't use medications to make it go down. It's best just to avoid it altogether. Because again, all these processed dairy, the more processed, the more toxic it becomes. They add more additives, they add more stabilizers, they do things for a shelf life. Because I think raw milk only lasts not even a week, I believe, in the refrigerator. Okay, I remember having to freeze gallons and then maybe put it in smaller jars and drink it as I go. But because I didn't drink a gallon of milk quick enough, so I may put it in some jars and freeze them and then drink it as I go. Cheese, the same way. You know, when you're eating cheese that doesn't have all the preservatives in it, it's going to mold quicker. So we want to eat things that are going to go bad, because when food doesn't go bad, it's because there's been processing that has caused that. So the food that doesn't go bad really lack nutritional value. But if it's not going bad and it has an expiration date of 2030, it probably has no nutritional value. So things that are freeze dried, frozen, things like that, that's different. We can find a lot of frozen foods. Freeze drying also saves, prolongs food. There's things out there that help food last. But for the most part, a lot of these major corporations are using preservatives and additives and all kinds of toxic things for a longer shelf life. And in turn, when we ingest these things, it does have a negative impact on your metabolism. All right. And then a lot of people ask me about non-dairy alternatives. Again, a lot of people like alternatives to use it as dairy. Like I talk about meat. They want meat, so they'll eat something that isn't real meat just for the sake of eating meat. So if you want meat, it's best just to eat a whole food form of it than something with chemicals that are combined to make it look and taste like meat. So a lot of these burgers that are out there, like the Beyond Burger, the Impossible Burger, they are made with a lot of unhealthy ingredients and chemicals to make it taste like meat. But I have vegetarian friends, and some of them are very good at it. So I adopt some things. I don't eat a lot of red meat either, because my body just doesn't. I guess as I get older, my digestive system isn't as efficient, so I can't break down red meat anymore. So I eat very little of it. I primarily eat fish and eggs. But if I do want a burger, I'll do like a mushroom burger, oyster mushroom burger, or I'll do a bean burger, something like that. So if I'm going to do a burger, it's going to be based on, a mushroom or some vegetables or something like that. And I'm not going to expect it to taste like red meat. Okay. So just kind of get in mind, like, are you looking for the taste or just an idea? Because a veggie burger tastes like veggie burger. The mushroom burger is pretty close. They're very delicious, but I'll do that because it's just a great way to eat mushrooms. Okay. So really keep that in mind. So the fifth and final food that may be destroying your metabolism is Refined grains. And I save this one for last because it's one of the most difficult items to get rid of because it's in everything. It's in our crackers, it's in our bread, it's in our pastas, it's in our pizzas, it's in our sandwiches. It's in everything. And it's like when I tell people this and I'm like, hey, you got to get rid of these refined grains, the first thing they ask is, well, what do I eat then? And I get it. I had a love affair with bread, all right? So I get it. I loved crackers. I loved, just noodles. I mean, I loved muffins. It's like it's a comfort food. But what I'm talking about is refined grains. So let me just share this. When you're in a point where, for me, I was pre-diabetic and had glucose metabolism issues, and because of the starch or the carb content in refined grains, at that point in my life, I got rid of all the grains, even the healthy grains. Because some of you will say, yeah, I know about the grains and the white flour, but you'll go to gluten-free products or you'll do the rice bread and the rice crackers. But you're, number one, still eating a lot of refined grains. And you think, okay, I'm just going to get rid of the gluten. But a lot of these gluten-free foods have just as many carbs and sugars that you'll find in a candy bar. So sometimes the substitutions aren't better either, all right? So we just got to get real and make sure that what we're doing is more the exception and not the rule. And just because you replaced it with gluten-free cereal and gluten-free bread and gluten-free pasta, it's a step, it's stepping stone, because I'm guilty of that too. But once you understand how it's really impacting the body, then you'll start to make those changes. Because for me, when I was pre-diabetic, I wasn't doing fast foods. I was doing a lot of the gluten-free products. I was doing the spinach wraps. I was doing that. And I still became diabetic. Now looking back, I was pre-diabetic for many, many years, even before I had children, looking back, but I never had a comprehensive blood panel to confirm that. But when I did and start to learn this stuff, I realized that this was an issue that I'd had for probably at least a decade until I discovered it. So a lot of these foods, even though they were quote unquote health foods, they weren't helping me because they were causing the same physiological response in my body, which was spiking those glucose and insulin levels. So I had to get rid of all grains to stabilize my glucose and insulin metabolism. Now I can go to like wild rice. I'll go to unrefined rice. I don't do that quick rice or anything like that. I will make my own bread, but I'll get the wheat berries, but I don't buy the flour. Now I do have flour and I'll use that for the occasional baking that I do, or, if I want to do like, I don't know. I have it in my shelf for those moments when I need flour. But like I said, my flour lasts forever because that's how rare I use it. I just keep it sealed. And when it's packaged correctly, it lasts quite some time. Again, when you get flour, even if it's almond flour or something like that, the way they make it flour to make it last so long is because the bran is removed, the germ is removed, and all it's left is that starch. And starch is just like sugar, and it spikes your glucose levels up. So again, I have that maybe as a thickener for soups or something like that, but I don't do a lot of those processed flours. It may just be an ingredient for a certain recipe that I'm doing. But when I do make my bread, I get the whole wheat berry and I grind it myself. So when I'm making my bread, I have the germ, I have the bran, I have the fiber, and it's not just from starch, because I'll have people in the transition and they'll buy whole wheat flour, but they're really getting the starch, which has very little, if any, nutritional value. So at the end of the day, it goes back to processing, and the wholer the food, I don't know if that's the proper way to say that, but the more whole the food, the better. And the more processed the food, the more dangerous it is to your body. So that's what we have to understand. And again, when these foods become highly processed, even if it started off as whole wheat or whole grain rice, once it's processed, it can cause these blood sugar spikes and lead to insulin resistance. And this is where people get tricked. All right. So like I said before, now that I'm healed, I can have lentils again. I can have rice again, but I still don't eat a lot of it because I pay attention to how my body responds to these foods. And I call it the sweet spot. I call it the area that my body can handle, because everything turns to glucose in the body. Everybody thinks you need all these carbs, but naturally you don't, because the body's metabolism converts your fats, your proteins, and your carbs. They all eventually get converted to glucose. So you can have a very low carb diet, but still get enough of the glucose you need, because glucose is the source of energy for your body. So the purpose of eating is to give your body what it needs so it can convert to glucose to produce energy. So glucose is what is metabolized in the body for energy. It converts to ATP. ATP is energy. I'm trying not to get too sciencey, but what happens is we're eating all these foods, and instead of the body being able to heal and function, a lot of its energy is into like, okay, I got all these chemicals I got to deal with. I'm not designed to deal with this all day. I'm inflamed. I'm toxic. All I want to do is help this person live, help this body live, but is pretty busy trying to process all these food colorings and toxins that are in your body. So this is what we got to understand. This is what we got to get back to so our bodies can heal. And there are a lot of studies on this, and this is kind of what helped me reverse my insulin resistance and my metabolic syndrome, was just understanding the connection between refined grain consumption and metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. So a lot of these diseases that we see today, heart disease and type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's, these are all metabolic diseases or metabolic dysfunction. So we got to get back to giving our bodies what it needs and watch these refined grains, these refined sugars, this refined dairy, and get back to learning how to eat to live. All right. So again, this is for educational purposes only. If you want to know more about individual coaching and how this works for you, you'll reach out, go in the description and set up a breakthrough call, because you need to get the information. Because even if you are a full-blown diabetic and you choose to continue to eat rice and beans and all those things and you're not getting well, this is when you may have to tweak even the whole grain foods. Okay, so there is a science to this. I just want to whet your appetite a little bit and let you know that the answers are out there. And if you're hearing something that you know makes sense and you're like, oh, I need to get this looked into, reach out, because this is not something to play with. Over time, these foods can destroy your metabolism. And I'm just fortunate that I did it when I did, because being in my 50s now, I don't know how I would look and feel if I didn't make these decisions over 10 years ago. But metabolic diseases are on a rise, and it's highly preventable. This is a lifestyle disease, and a lot of people are suffering from lifestyle metabolic diseases, and it's coming from these foods that we eat on a daily basis. So again, we got to get back to the basics, and just a quick recap. Refined grains leads to insulin spikes and metabolic issues. Refined grains have lots of other chemicals and preservatives in there for longer shelf life. And whole grains are a healthier alternative, but that depends on the status of your health. And again, there are some swaps, but at the end of the day, we really have to understand what our bodies need, and you won't know until you look. You have to make the decision based on what your health needs. And sometimes we need transitions, because it's not easy in this day and age to make healthy eating choices, because they're not easily available to us. So I'm trying my best to give you resources and guides if you're in between places and you just need something to get through it. I had to do it, and I'm trained in this stuff. I had to make progress over time. I didn't jump from grains to just not eating at all. I was doing the gluten-free. I was doing those things, but I realized it wasn't enough. So you got to know, are you doing enough to get healthy? So just know that we have to start making changes, and just know that progress is better than perfection. That's another thing that really holds us back. We want to be all or none. But if you could just reduce that inflammatory burden on your body, then your body can metabolize the way it's designed. But you got to know where you're at and understand where you need to go and understanding the steps it takes to get there. Okay? So a quick summary before we close. I know this was a pretty lengthy session, but I wanted to make sure you got what you needed. Certain topics can't just be rushed over, and I can easily do a whole episode on each one of these, but that's where you come in. If you want to learn more about a particular topic that I didn't elaborate on, let me know. I'm creating this content for you so you can understand what you need to do and what you need to understand. So just remember, we got to watch out for these 5 foods. Number 1 was sugar. And again, these are like the refined version of these. But again, depending on where you are, you may have to reduce it or get it out your diet completely. So we talked about sugar. We talked about artificial sweeteners. We talked about refined oils. We talked about processed dairy. And then we closed it out with refined grains. So the key is do the best you can. We got to get the knowledge. And that's why I love to really elaborate on a lot of these things. But we got to do it. And the best thing you can do is just start making gradual dietary changes. Do what you can now. Get the book and start experimenting with healthy recipes now. And if you need help, reach out. We need real nutrition. We need real health. And I just strongly believe that we can't fix a true living body with these toxic artificial ingredients. So we really got to get back to the basics. We really got to understand how to feed our bodies. We got to learn to understand how to eat to live, to think to live, to, just whatever it takes to really optimize how our bodies perform. I appreciate you hanging in there and listening to this full episode. And go ahead and check out the description. Schedule a breakthrough call. Order the Shop and Savor cookbook. Follow me on my other platforms. But you got to fill your mind. You got to educate yourself and use that to really help you make these decisions that work for you. Because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. Sometimes we don't know what is right and wrong anymore. There's a lot of confusion out there. But once you understand the basics and the foundation, you'll find that overwhelm and that confusion and that frustration goes away. It's that lack of knowledge that weakens us. It's that lack of knowledge that confuses us. So that's my purpose and that's my mission. And I guess I'll go ahead and close today's episode. But again, check out the show notes. Be sure to follow this podcast, like, subscribe, depending on what platform you are listening on. And let me know your feedback. Let me know what you need me to clarify on. What would you like to learn more about? I'm here for you because I'm on this mission where we need to understand our bodies. We need to take control of our health. And that is my mission, to help those who are ready to take their health and their life to the next level. And until next time, go out there and achieve more freedom in your health and your life. Take care. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, seal the deal to heal by leaving a review, subscribing to the podcast, and sharing with a friend. Thanks again, and we'll continue the journey next week.